I guess I gotta acknowledge where I got this from. So you know how everybody's here to get a degree, right? Then it makes you you get a certificate that says you know this, right? Or even in a classroom, for me to be in a classroom, I got my bachelor's, my master's, to be in this position that I'm in. So with Ojibwe stuff, it's all a matter of who you sat with and who you learned from is how you get your authority, and then how you teach things and stuff. So with Moxie Game, I just want to acknowledge my teachers and where I learned. So um, I learned from a set of guys at Red Lake when I was, I think, 9 is when I got my introduction into the game. And, you know, you, people learn different now than they did. So when I learned it, it was kind of like a traditional method where I watched it for a long time. And then in an opening part, I got to sit in one piece of the game, master that position, and then another, and then moved on to having my own team and stuff. And usually young guys would who they first played with, usually they stick together. And so to me, my brothers, now my nephews, we play on the same team, and a couple of guys we grew up with, always the same teams we play with since we were little in high school. So some of the guys are that I learned from was Dale Johns, Adrian Lusher, Doc Jones, then Lee Lusher Senior, Lee Lusher Junior. Um, Adam Lusher was a little bit there, and then some of the other guys I played with were from Rosal River. Red Lake Band and Rosal River are the same band, just the border kind of connects them. There's a little story behind that. But Terry Nelson, Gabe Hayden, a lot of those old guys is where I learned how to play Moxon game from. So it's right now it's kind of considered a men's game. There was evolution to the game. So when Ojibwe started to get colonized, that even our language became kind of colonized. Like the word Nindiquim came out of things where like Nindiquim is a common word for my girlfriend or my woman. Doesn't make sense because you can't own an animate object, but yet the Nindiquim is you own this woman. So it was a colonial thinking that women were ownership. So like Wasabik, my Wasabikwe is my grandma's cousin, and she insisted on changing that, using that word, and use the older word, archaic word niwu for a companion through life. So a lot of those colonial concepts and thinkings were ingrained in some Ojibwe things. So our Moxon game was one of those things also where I'll tell a quick legend on where it came from, and then it kind of evolved into where it is now, where it's mainly like see a lot of tournaments around polos. It's a tournament for money and stuff, but it wasn't always like that. It's a healing game, and there's a lot of other things with it, teachings with it and stuff. So as Ojibwe, as we all know, is the most complex language in the world, right? I think anybody will agree with that. And it's still in the Guinness Book of World Records, right, for the most complex. Well, anyway, Moxon game is I believe is the most complex game. It ain't. It's not like any other game where you kind of think you're just going to sit down and learn how to play it, or I'll watch it and learn it. You actually got to play it to know it, to get it. And then even after that, it's like several years and different things where like even now, like even I've been playing, I'm 52 and I've been playing since I was 10, and there's still strategies are changing for me in different ways, and even the way I teach and stuff. So it's a very complex game, and a few of the things that kind of surprised me is like with our thinking, where I get a lot of people that think they're going to learn the game real quick, like sit down once or twice and play it, and they don't get it. And it kind of makes me think that even we think that native people were this, like, just walking around the woods pounding on drums or something, like it was very simple and stuff. But when you learn the game, people are like, holy shit, man, this is so complex thinking, complex counting and stuff. And it's it proves that we were like we were a master race before colonization, and so it's kind of hard for me to think that, because how much of that thinking is in other things in our lives, like even with language and some of the traditions and stuff. Even some of the norms now are beginning to change. And I like the word decolonize because it you know, it goes back to that original, like even with the game, it goes back to I got girl players and they're my most powerfulest players. And you get a little bit of flack over it, but I tell anybody in the community, I'll put them up against the champion male teams out there. I'd like to see it anyways. The challenge is always open for that. Okay, so back to the game. I kind of don't know where to talk with a little bit, but besides my students, anybody else raise your hand if you've played or if you know a little bit about the game. Yeah, you know a little bit, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, just so I know where to kind of talk from. So I think the best thing to do is just to give the legend real fast. So you got a, like a little concept where it came from. And the reason I'm doing that, since I've been teaching now, I actually think different about that. So what I've noticed is when students, when they learn the game from the legend and then through, they respect the game more and actually play a little bit better. When students come in and don't learn the legend first and stuff, as my students have commented at some of the tournaments, there's more swearing, there's disrespectful things done, and the game isn't respected in its players as much as it was if you get the legend with it. You know, and I think that goes to our whole teaching with tobacco first for everything, you know. So with Moccasin game, it's a very old game, and I guess I need to say where I got that from too. So while I was growing up, you know, we're always taught, even with the language and stuff, there wasn't language classes. You know, my little bit of Ojibwe I know came from having to know some, because in Red Lake there was still homes that when you got to the house, you left English at the door, and you had to you had to use Ojibwe in the home once you went in there. And you know, there were several homes like that. So my grandma, I would go to her and I'd say they said this and this, and then she would say, well, you say this and this. You know, John Hill, John Gwaish, Wasabik. There was some blues out in Little Rock, but there were several homes still that when you got to the door, you had to use Ojibwe inside the home. I don't think there's any homes like that left anymore that I know of. But so with the game was kind of the same way. I heard bits and pieces of this legend, but nobody ever sat me down and gave me the full legend. And by meaning that, like just how we shared tobacco, you know, somebody tells me the legend gives it to me, so I gift them back with tobacco and some gifts and stuff. So I knew bits and pieces of it. And when I was older, so when I started teaching, I was like, when I'm teaching, I got to teach it from its inception and everything about the game if I'm going to be a teacher of this. So I set out to find out who still knew the legend. All the old guys, Gabe Hayden, Doc Jones, Fred Jackson, all these guys that I played with through the legend had passed on. So I was like, I couldn't find anybody that they knew bits and pieces like me, but didn't know the full legend. So I called. I got a hold of two people. One was Tommy Counselor up in he's across the border anyway. I know his brother Louis really well. But Tommy's an old guy and stuff. I called him and he says, you know what, I'll do it for you, but you got to bring some money. You got to come and stay for a few days. And I had just retired from the police department, so I wasn't really I didn't have any money really here and that stuff, you know. Plus I couldn't, you know, really travel. So I called the other guy, Maji Guneash, and he I talked to him a little bit, and he right away asked, who are you? And then I told him who I was and stuff, and then, you know, asked me who my dad was, and I told him, you know, I have a white father and my mom's native. And it kind of turned off to him, you know, that's a term called Wisako Day, so you're kind of lesser a little bit in some thinking. But he kind of like shut down a little bit. He was like, well, I don't know. He says, you know, I said, I haven't played in years. I don't know if anybody plays anymore. And I had to convince him. I says, hey man, I says, we still play Red Lake. Roseau still plays. And I said, I'm teaching in class. I said, but I want to teach that legend. You know, I want to do it right. And but he was getting ready to hang up the phone. I felt like he was really like, no, it's kind of gone. There's no sense in this. And then he was asking about who my mom was, and then who my grandparents were. So, you know, I said my grandpa's Fred Lisi from Whiter. My grandma's Bernice Gijig from Boysport. Turns out my grandma's his cousin. So he kind of changed his tune, and he's okay. He says, you know what, we'll do this. He says, you know, I'll be back, because I'll be back. I take a trip. I'll be back in a few weeks. So he gave me a date and a time to be over at his house middle of winter. And he said, you know how to do this right? And I said, yeah, you know, that's tobacco, gifts and stuff and time. So So the day came, I brought another Ojibwe speaker with me in case I missed anything, just in case. I brought my brother, one of my cousins with me. I piled up as much blankets as I could, tobacco, as much money as I had, stuff. When we drove over, it was a 4-hour drive to go see him. And then I presented, and it was all evening, and he did it right. They had a bear hide, and then we did ceremony. Then he told the legend, and he told it, and it took about 3 hours to tell it in Ojibwe. And I'm glad I brought another speaker because there was some of the things I missed. So the legend I'm going to tell you is going to take about maybe 8 minutes, 10 minutes. So it's but his thing is that when he was told the legend, it was told him in Ojibwe, and he had to tell it in Ojibwe is the only way he could. But so he said I could I had the option to translate it to English, which I did do the best I could, but I'm still missing pieces of it. So with that, I'm telling you that this information isn't just something that you just get it. You got to get it the right way, and there's a lot of I'm telling you something that I had to spend time, gifts, and go after. So there's work in it and stuff. So I'm telling you that in the sense that once I tell this, you have a obligation to carry this on. You know it now, so it's yours. The only way you're gonna remember that is to retell it, and to make sure other kids and it goes on to the next generation. My grandma used to say the generation that loses this stuff is the one that pays for it. I don't know what that meant, but it's not going to be me. So I teach everybody as much as I can. But I'm telling you that I did that, and now I'm gifting it to you, and you're going to be a holder of this legend also and stuff. So with that, one of the reasons it took 3 hours for him to tell this legend is when you tell a legend in Otazukon, you start right now this time of the year, and you talk for one whole year about what Ojibwe were doing, how they lived, what they were doing. And once that year gets around, you get back to this time of the year, then you start the legend. That's why legends take so long, It's cool to listen to because then you hear about what some older people talk about how we lived. Like now you kind of think Ojibwe were, just wigwam dwelling, no drums and stuff, but it's really interesting how they lived their lives and did things, So that's one of the reasons it took so long. And then he went into the legend, and there are some verbs in there. One of them, Anton helped me identify about what's that one where you put the boughs on the bottom of the wigwam?
Where you put the boughs on the wigwam?
Yeah, and the floor. There's a verb just for that.
Oh yeah.
It's an archaic word, but but one thing it tells me is that the legend's really old because there were some like old words in their concepts. So I just wanted to say that part, and then in the legend there was a piece of it that survived that boys fort that's actually an extension of that first one, and we couldn't cover everything that first night. And then there's the nomenclature of the game. So it kind of goes in 3 phases. So I'm going to tell the first 2 part, and I think we'll demonstrate the game so you can see it, okay? So also just know that Ojibwe style Moccasin, we put Ojibwe on there because one other style, Sioux style. They don't like to be called Sioux or like that word. So if you go over there, just call them Dakota or Guan. But it's a downed version of our Ojibwe style, the less complex version. And it was after 2 war parties that met in Roseville, Minnesota, and played the game. We showed them the game instead of fighting. And then in the story, I can tell it's in my book anyway. But they ended up Ojibwe won the game, and then out of kind of being humane about it, both Dakota and Ojibwe war party or hunting parties hunted together and then shared the meat. And it was one of the first times there was peace in 124 years of really bloody war. So it brings, and that's what the game is known for. With that, so there is a Sioux version, and they call our style traditional style. They acknowledge that part. My grandma, also the things I learned from my grandma Fanny when I was in high school. She was in her late 80s, and then she was raised by her grandma who lived to be 108 and was alive during the Dakota battles at Red Lake. So the information and the stuff I'm telling you, like, is really old, like before Jamokes were here. And there's even a family story of Bemidji, how it was one and a half farms. There was one farm, the small one. Then all of a sudden overnight it just ballooned up. There was like immigrants all over, different languages, and stuff. So I was saying that to tell you that the information I talk about and stuff is really old, and it comes, before there was contact and stuff, Okay, so the game, what happened was there was no Moccasin game, And the legend, we're gonna skip the whole year thing before, and I'm just gonna tell what I can in English about it. There was a young man. He had a wife and a kid. I think it was a daughter, and they lived as normal Ojibwe. They were on a waterway somewhere. The young guy was really into. He was a younger man, so he had to like kind of take care of his father's area and stuff, and his wife. And he had a daughter. She was pretty young. And the legends don't say it, but they died. His wife and his kid died, and he was stricken with grief. He just like grieved really bad. To the point he just stopped eating and stuff, and then his family would come see him. They would try to cheer him up and talk to him. And he went days like that, and then he it got so bad. So one morning he was like, you know what, I just want to die and go to the next world. And so he took off. He knew his family, everybody was keep bugging him. So early one morning he heads out walking, and he just keeps walking for days and days. He keeps walking, and in the legend he comes across. There's a few times some things happen. There's one time he comes across a deer, and this deer, when we hunt stuff, it's not like you're sneaking up and getting it. It's that animal's blessing you and your family. That's how Ojibwe view hunting. And his deer seen him, and seen him was so pitiful. I guess his clothes were hanging, and they're ripped up from walking through the woods, and he was frail looking. And his deer tried to give himself to him, and he walked up, and the deer wouldn't move. He stayed right in front of him, trying to give himself to him. And he had to walk around this deer. And he took off. There was a partridge one time, took pity on him, and was trying to go under his feet. And he kept having to miss him. And these animals and these different money spirits were trying to help him, and he refused everything. And he kept going and going, and he was finally so like famished and stuff. He was so weak. He was crossing a little field in the brush, and then he was getting in through that field, and in the middle he was just so weak he finally fell down, and he laid there a long time, and he was thinking, my time's coming soon. I'm gonna go to the next world with my wife and kid. But anyway, he's laying there, and he starts hearing something coming. He can hear something in the woods, like coming through. And it took a while, and it got there, and then he knew it was somebody. It was a human. And then so he had been traveling so far. He said, I hope I hope it's an enemy warrior, and he can kill me and send me on to the next world. And it walks up, and it's a guy, and he stands over him and starts talking to him and says, hey, what you okay? And the guy says, leave me alone. I want to die. Leave me alone. Kill me or move on. And the guy was like, like take it easy. Every day is a good day. And he went on to talk to him about stuff, and he sat up, and he told him what had happened and what was going on about his wife and stuff. And the guy was telling him, like, told him some of the things too, like the next world, they're okay. And before you know it, you'll be there also, but you have a purpose here on the earth. And this guy says, well, I don't know what this purpose is, and what could it be? I'm miserable. And he says, he says, I got something. I can give you something. You can bring it back to the people. And he started to tell him he said, there's this game, and he had this knapsack on, like, rolled up on his, like, a backpack. And he took it out and told him about a game. And this guy started to get kind of interested in stuff. And he took this pack, and he started to take things out, and he took all these game pieces out, and he talked about like the different ways they'd be used and stuff. And he told him that this game was healing, and he could bring it back to the people. And he said and he told him, he says, I can't bring back your wife and kid, but I can bring back some happiness, and you can bring back happiness to the village. And told him the game will last as long as the world lasts, and that it would change through time. There would be different ways of playing it. So he tells him all this, and the guy got interested in stuff, and then he started to feel better. And then he said, well, before I show you how to play it, he says you better eat something. And he pulled out his he had some tea in a little thing, and then he had some there's an Ojibwe word for it. They used to like grind up meat and choke cherries and stuff. There was a word for it. I can't remember what it is. But anyway, he ate it, and he started eating it, and instantly he started feeling better. It was almost like a medicine. And he drank the tea, and some say it was swamp tea, some say it was like a raspberry tea. But anyway, he ate all that stuff, and he immediately started feeling better. He got his energy, he could think and stuff. He started feeling better, like it was medicine. And then he put the game out, and it showed him how it would be played. Showed it how it would be played and stuff. And then the last thing he took out was the drum, and he took the drum out, and he was singing, showed him a couple of songs and stuff. And then he he rolled everything back up and gave it to him. And then said, here, bring this back to the people. And he says, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know where my village is. He said, I don't even know how long I've been walking. And he told him, he says, when you get up, there was like a birch tree. And he said, you see that tree? He said, walk towards that and keep walking. He said, in 2 days, you'll be home. And then the guy started to walk away. And he had he had given the guy on the ground a sack and stuff, but he watched this guy walk away. That he went back the same way he came. And he took 4 steps, and it was black fur from his knees down. He took another 4 steps, it was waist down, black fur. Another 4 steps, shoulders down. Then the next 4 steps, he was into the brush a little bit, and it went down, and it looked back, and it was a bear. Then he ran off in the woods. So the guy knew something spiritual had happened, and he got up and he took off, and he walked the way that he told him. And then on the second morning, he showed up. He went over a little hill, and his village was there. And then so he walked down in the village, and he got there, and people were like, holy shit, we thought you were gone. And they're all surprised and welcoming him and stuff. And they took him, he went straight to his dad's wigwam, and he immediately told his dad what had happened. And his dad told him, that bear had given him that. He says, it's really serious. He says, dude, you better do exactly what he told you to do. And so his instructions were, when he got back, to build a lodge special for it, and then the game set to make 7 more sets. And then he said the next couple nights he would dream of the first players, the first players of this game. And so sure enough, his dad said, I'll make the wigwam. He said, you start on making the game sets. So they made everything and got it all put together. And then he ran tobacco out to each boy that he had dreamt of. These 2 days he had dreamt of the first 2 teams that would play. And he went gave tobacco to him, and told him to show up at a certain time in the evening when it was getting dark at this lodge. A little bit on this one too, if anybody, I'd like to put this in there about my own family, because the second part of this is what survived in Boys Fort. And my grandma's brother said that my great grandpa and rumored that in that first set that one of our relatives were in those first ones way back. They were descendants of we had family at that first game. But anyway, so they made all that stuff, and he went out and seen those boys, and they're sure enough, they all came together at that one night, and they played the first game. It was all night, and they quit at daylight. Then the next 4 days they did that, and I guess they got through the whole game, and that's how we play it. So from there, that Muckman must have told him that this game it's like life. So it takes care of its players. So even in my own life, all the guys like Gabe Hayden, Doc Jones, Fred, all them guys lived to be really old. The players that I knew. So I really think it takes care of it takes care of its players. And then the Bear said the game would go out to there's Sioux style, there's a Ho Chunk style. They're not like our style. They're a little bit more easier than ours. And then ours, even the rules are a little bit different. It's kind of like the language is actually tiers. You got a southern version, we're mid, and then you got a northern version. But our mid one is like Red Lake, Leech Lake, White Earth, Boys Fort. All kind of are on that middle tier of the rules are the same. Mille Lacs, East Lake, that area is a little bit different, and then you get further into Canada, it's a little bit different. But the game has evolved from it. So at first they called it Mukwatage, bear game, and then we played it at night, and then there was a change where it evolved to Moccasin game because of the Moccasins. So a long time ago, when you walked around, you carried a second set. Either they got wet, you had to put another pair on, or you wore them out. So everybody had 2 sets with them. So when you got down to play, you just put your Moccasins down, and that's what they hit under. Now we just use hiding pads that are shaped a little bit different with those. And then too, I want to say too, with what was kind of on to teaching. So when I worked at Korean law enforcement before I became a teacher. And one of my introductions to teaching was my brother Roger was a teacher at Red Lake for a lot of years, and for some extra money did some contract work with rehab, and he worked with male youth that were in a group that were actually court ordered into this group where you do some community service and then you do learn some cultural stuff. So my brother was doing this and he says, hey, can you want to come help me with the language part, and we'll teach these young boys how to play Moccasin. There's 12 that were court ordered to our session, and we I think we met for 10 weeks. We met with them twice a week. And at the police department, one of the nights I was on duty and I got the captain okay, because it's kind of a community policing thing to go help out with this, right? So anyway, long story short, we had a good time with these young men and stuff. It was my first time teaching anything, and I kind of liked it. But anyway, I was at a trial one time and the head judge came down and saw me and says, hey, he says, what all did you guys do in your culture thing? And I said, really? I said, how come? I said, all we did was some language and taught him how to play Moccasin game. And he says, well, he says, I got to tell you, he says, whatever you guys did was pretty awesome. He said, it's the first time I had a group of boys that did not recidivate. They didn't commit another crime while they were meeting with us. So he said, whatever you guys are doing is awesome. He said, it really, really works or whatever. So, but I thought of that legend because that's what it says. It keeps them out of trouble and keeps them doing good and living well. And the old guys I know that played, really, they all lived to be pretty old, you know. But that first set, it's rumored that first set they lived to be, that, you know, and I don't know if this is true, but some of them say it'd be, you know, between 150 to 200 years old. That first team lived to be, and they did nothing but teach the game through their whole lives and stuff. But they say it, you know, takes care of its players, which I think it does do, you know.
On the wood crabbing, what you're playing, you see. Right on camera, right there. While you were talking, one looked so crabby, like, I know, that's what I just said. In the zone.